Greetings, I'm your host, Jason Miles, and welcome to another episode of This is Revolution Podcast for all the returning listeners, subscribers, and our very valued patrons. Thank you so much. If you do dig what we're doing, please hit like and, of course, subscribe. It is a passive gesture that goes a long way in promoting the channel. Just a quick reminder, this is one of two shows tonight. After we speak with Matt, I'll be speaking with union organizer, activist, and author Eric Blanc about what we can do to stop ICE beyond Minnesota. And while we should be excited for some left political victories, the fight is just beginning. If you do dig the wide variety of programming we provide here on TIR and you want to make sure we can stay on the air and you want to join us for our movie nights, which we just recently had, this past Tuesday, we watched the rare film. Again, it took years for me to find this film online. Bad Dreams. It's a Nightmare on Elm Street knockoff. It's kind of insane. If you want to join us for these movie nights and champagne rooms, become a patron or a paid YouTube subscriber. When you become a patron or a paid YouTube subscriber, you get champagne room and movie night access for as little as $3 a month or $30 for the year. You get the satisfaction knowing that your small donation goes a long way in keeping TIR on the air. Now let's get to it. Venezuela is more than oil. Donald Trump is the kayfabe president, and when he isn't declaring a jihad on cities in his own country, he's attempting regime change across the Western Hemisphere. He wants to be remembered as the greatest president of all time, not the most infamous, though sometimes it's hard to tell if he even cares about the difference. As we've discussed before on this show, 2026 hurls even further off the rails than 2025. Ending with the Trump administration brazenly bombing Venezuelan fishing boats under the guise of fighting illegal drugs, a bizarre campaign that culminated in the January capture of Nicolas Maduro. In an astonishing press conference, Trump openly admitted that this operation wasn't about national security, it was about oil. We hear constantly that Venezuela holds the largest oil reserves on earth, but even Trump, who claims to know everything, and for some reason, all of a sudden, a real estate magnate knows about oil, seems clueless about what that actually means. Venezuela's reserves are, in fact, heavy, difficult, and costly to extract, requiring years of sustained investment and a stable political environment before production can rise meaningfully. The economics here aren't nearly as simple as grab the oil and cash out. Meanwhile, Chevron and other U.S. majors have already eyed Venezuelan assets. China has poured billions into the country, and Trump's latest gambit, promising to import 30 to 50 million barrels of Venezuelan crude under U.S. control, has sparked fresh geopolitical ripple effects. Today, we're speaking with professor and journalist Matt Huber, who's written extensively on this topic and has a deep grasp of the political economy of oil and power shaping these developments. We'll unpack what Venezuela's oil situation actually is, whether Trump's plan could ever meaningfully bring more crude to global markets or cut prices at the pump, and if this whole strategy, joined at the hip with draconian domestic ICE occupations and border militarization, might end up as an albatross around Trump's political neck. Please welcome Matt Huber.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for taking the time to talk with me, and thank you for writing a very interesting piece. It came out a few weeks ago, and I think I quoted it on an introduction we did a few weeks ago. Let's just start with the basics. You argue in your article that Trump's intervention in Venezuela isn't just about oil, at least not in the simplistic grab the reserves and lower gas prices way that many commentators frame it. Could you walk us through the political economic logic that's actually at play here?
Yeah, after I wrote the article, there was a funny line by another scholar in the Financial Times where he said, he thinks Rubio surely used oil as a pretext to convince Trump to do it. And he's sure that Trump thinks it's about oil, but he's wrong. I think it's very clear that yeah, Trump thinks in his mind, it's this big, grab for the oil, and Venezuela has the most oil, so it must be easy for us to take it. But as you were saying in the intro, it's a very particularly heavy type of oil that's very, very costly to extract. Since I wrote the article, I have found that one estimate from The Economist suggests that the break-even price for this oil in Venezuela is around $80 per barrel.
Damn.
And when the invasion happened, it was under 60, right? So, and it's not just the fact that the oil is very heavy and difficult to extract. It's the fact that a lot of the infrastructure in Venezuela has been degraded, not least because of U.S. sanctions, but also, we must probably admit, a little bit of economic mismanagement on the Maduro regime. And it would take loads of investment. Even if the infrastructure problems weren't there, it would take huge amounts of investment with no guarantee that you're going to profit off that oil. Because if we're under 60 and it costs 80, you don't have to be a math wizard to know that's not a viable investment model. And that's why when Trump assembled all the big executives of many of the major oil companies in the country and at the White House, Exxon literally said that Venezuela is uninvestable, right?
Damn.
Because they also said that week, they go, we have been expropriated twice in the last several decades in Venezuela. And that's another thing the oil companies are really always worried about, is what they call political risk, which means if a state or a government is not stable or has offered sort of very clear legal, regime and tax and royalty type of regimes that make it very clear to investors like what the situation is going to be, they're not going to want to invest in a place where the nature of the government is in flux and unstable, and you don't know if and not to mention, I mean, Trump took out Maduro, but the Maduro regime is still in place.
Yeah.
And it's still, it's a socialist regime. It's not a friendly to capital regime, right?
Isn't that what the oil companies are kind of worried about?
Well, yeah, that's part of it. Yeah. And, but I think it's even more that they're just no one knows what the nature of the Venezuelan state is going to look like in 6 months, in 2 years. And again, it's going to take years of investment to get this off the ground. So if you're a capitalist, you want to know that there's a very stable, peaceful, capitalist friendly regime that's going to be in place for years to come. And of course, that's the opposite of what's happening right now. It's very unclear what's going to happen. So
this is kind of different than the regime change we're used to reading about in our history books, where a person was implanted in power that would be very friendly to Western business interests. It was reported that the current regime, the people inside of it, were meeting with the Trump administration about a surrender of Maduro. Maduro is currently in custody. I don't even know that all the charges. It's like drug charges, and
one is a gun charge, which I find
Jesus,
like he has a machine gun of some kind.
Why would we give a shit that a leader of a foreign nation has a gun? But anyway, let's not even go there. That's insane and just on its head.
Yes.
Is this harder to resonate with American people because of the fear mongering that we've heard about Venezuela and the fact that it is a complex story to tell? Because on one hand, you have people that just say it's just the sanctions and Maduro's doing a good job, and you have people that have actually left the country. He's not doing that good of a job. We understand the sanctions, and it's not being done well. So you've had a massive flood of Venezuelans out of the country. There is no flood of people back into the country, correct?
No, yeah. I will say that Maduro really got a tough deal because Chavez really benefited from the oil boom. You know, he presided, basically he came into power, and then we went into this, you know, what they call a commodity super cycle, where the price of oil just went up, particularly in the aughts, and really crested. And that was the height of Chavismo. You know, that was his heyday. And, you know, I actually think it's pretty cool that he was, unlike many oil regimes, he actually used a lot of that oil revenue to try to develop what he called Bolivarian socialism. And there was a lot of redistribution of the oil rents to lift people out of poverty, and a lot of good stuff. But when he passed away in 2013, not exactly, but almost immediately after, the price of oil crashed.
Yeah.
And that's the problem when your socialist state is based on the sale of a very volatile commodity. When the price goes down, then your entire state revenue goes with it. And so Maduro sort of came right into basically an economic crisis. I think you could argue that it's not looking as great now, but like other regimes like Bolivia or others were able to weather that price crash a little better and sort of manage it a little better than Maduro did. But he did he had terrible timing. And not to mention, you know, Chavez was a sort of singular, charismatic leader and inspiring in all these ways that maybe Maduro wasn't. But he did just sort of come into power in this very inopportune historical moment, for sure.
Now, Venezuela has the largest proven oil reserves in the world, but as you note, proven reserves aren't the same as economically extractable oil. Could you explain why Venezuela's heavy crude isn't just lying around ready for export? I think Trump thinks it's like Jed Clampett, dig a hole and
yeah. And they say, like, you know, some reserves, like in the Middle East, they say you just stick a straw in the ground and the oil just comes gushing out, right? But that's the opposite of what's happening in Venezuela. And even that number, which is 300 billion barrels, apparently that number actually was reported during the Chavez regime when prices were a lot higher.
Gotcha.
Right. And so it's not even clear to me that that number is accurate given the relatively low prices we're dealing with now. But I also learned that it's estimated that Venezuela has something. So it's 300 billion reserves, which they claim are economical, even though I doubt that. But there's something like 1 trillion of barrels of oil that are just there, right? And that's the kind of interesting difference between, I forget the name for the just the physical amount of oil versus the proven reserves, which are those that are economical to produce. So, yeah. They've got a lot of it, but it's very debatable whether or not it could be produced by a capitalist regime for profit, right? And that's not, you know, if Venezuela were to resurrect its national oil company, maybe they could try to develop it not for profit, but for profit, it's not going to look like a very enticing situation.
So this expensive operation to extract Nicolas Maduro and save Venezuela, is it just been a monumental waste of time then?
You know, as you were suggesting, you know, it seemed a lot of people were, particularly in the United States, Venezuelan immigrants, the expat population were kind of hoping that this would happen, right? And there was, I think, when the news came through, I think an initial kind of celebratory mood amongst, and it seems very clear that Maduro, the most recent election, I think in 2024, was probably not by the book, and that there is, we have to be honest, is I think a large base of support for Machado, the opposition leader, who was barred from running in the previous election. And so I think there was a groundswell of opposition to the Maduro regime. Not to, and I don't want to overstate. I mean, I think the Maduro regime still has their base of support. I think it's declining, but I think they still have a huge base of support. It's a divided country in all these ways. And but once it became clear, which it became clear hours after this operation,
Yeah.
that Trump was going to just keep the regime in place and not even talk about, I grew up when the Iraq war is happening. It's like, usually you expect them to talk about, okay, now what we're going to do is set up the conditions for democracy and elections and all this stuff. And there's just been absolutely no talk about that at all. And I think a lot of the people that were excited about this prospect then became pretty depressed pretty quickly, because they realized, well, you decapitated the regime, but the regime is still in place. And again, it's not a regime that's particularly friendly to capital in general, and Machado and her opposition certainly would be. But I think Trump is just understands that would be a much more messy prospect to actually do a regime change like they did in Iraq. I mean, which involved an occupation and an extremely bloody conflict. So he's more into the spectacle.
That's his thing. I just wrote about it for Current Affairs. Yeah.
Yeah, like on made for TV kind of, like the special forces come, they take out the guy, and I think that's what he was looking for. So
I do think we did a show about the movie Sicario, and I do think he thinks that's how drugs work. I think he thinks there's houses with dead bodies, and I think a lot of people think that's how cartel, which is like weird. Like, why would people just put bodies in the house instead of the ground? The ground is way better. It's been better forever. Do you? This is just conjecture. Do you think, had that woman given Donald Trump the Nobel Prize, like not taking it, that he would have made her president?
It is very disturbing, the degree to which this Nobel Prize stuff seems to be influencing his actions.
It feels, look, I think the man is that petty. I really think
he
the
really
man is that petty, and I don't think he takes. I think he takes the job as seriously as he's taken any job in his life. So when you refer to Greenland as a rental unit, you can't lease the property, you got to own it. I'm like, that's okay. It's not a rental unit. It's people live there. What are those?
But I mean, Machado gave him the Nobel Prize. I mean, how sad to have her have to grovel like that, come to the White House and hand it over. Even though
how too late works. You got kids. No, man. No, it's too late to say sorry now. Nope. Go to your room. Give me that switch too before you go to your room. You ain't going to your room with the switch. Too late for sorries.
Yeah.
Some argue that if Venezuela could meaningfully raise output, it could depress global prices.
Right.
But are we anywhere near that scenario now?
No. I mean, I've read estimates that maybe within a couple of years you could get. So Venezuela was only, in the last year was only producing about a million barrels per day.
Mm-hmm.
And to give context, I think Saudi Arabia is somewhere around 12 million barrels per day, and the U.S. is up around 20.
Damn.
So they've actually declined to be a much smaller player in the oil. And at their peak, I guess before Chavez, they produced, I think, around 3.5, maybe 4. And
so they were never that big of a producer. Is it because of the refining that has to be done?
I think it definitely is to some degree, because a lot of their oil is so heavy and difficult, so it hasn't been extracted yet. So they do have easier to extract oil, and I think they've tapped through that. But yeah, they never were on the level of the Middle East and what the United States has become only in the last 15 years because of this insane fracking boom that we've had. But I think there is some thought that in the next couple years, maybe they could get up to 2, and then in the next 5 years, maybe they could get pushing back towards that 3 level. But that again would take billions and billions of investment, right?
Mhm.
And they, and again, because the market is already oversupplied, the price is already depressed. The question would be, no one in the oil sector is begging for this oil to be flooded into the market. That would just be a bad situation. So, and if they did just really jack up in output, it could really threaten the other high cost oil producers, which are in the United States. And they are, like I said before, they're the frackers, the shale producers that
Yeah.
they need something like $60 a barrel to stay profitable. And again, we've recently been below that, right? And so there's a real tension with Trump's, of course, the affordability crisis. And he, I think, has this thing that he's going to lower prices, and particularly gas prices. And to be fair, gas prices have actually gone down over the last year. Nothing, I think, in particular to what he's done. But that actually is because oil prices have gone down. And insofar as oil prices go down, it goes against Trump's other slogan, which is drill, baby, drill. Because
literally he said that.
Yeah, he's always saying that. And right now, the oil industry in the US is not very keen on drilling because, again, the market's already oversupplied. And if that Venezuelan oil were to come, it would just make a bad situation even worse for these producers. So yeah, they were certainly not clamoring for let's invade Venezuela and take the oil. Like, that's the last thing they would want to happen.
So if if U.S. oil companies are not behind this, right? This is not a Mossadegh situation that we have here. This is antithetical to that situation. This is all driven by Trump himself and his regime himself, right? The Trump regime, which is kind of filled with people like Marco Rubio, who this feels like his hands are kind of all over it. If the plan is to have regime change in Cuba, how is any of this playing with the American public? Who in the United States in the year of our Lord 20 and 26 give a hot fuck about Cold War tensions with countries that, have no more ties to the Soviet Union that doesn't exist anymore? How does this play outside of Florida?
It's unclear. I was going to say that, to my last point about the oil and gas industry in the United States, I will say that industry, and also the workers, we have to admit, have become a huge sort of base for MAGA. And famously in the 2020 elections, you really saw a lot of those oil and gas regions really shift towards Trump, and then even more in 2024. So again, if he were to flood the market and destroy that industry in our country, it would be, again, one of these ironies where a lot of his base is getting harmed economically by the policies, right? Rubio clearly has like a very strong ideological anti-communism, and I think he has had this kind of sense that if we could take out Maduro, then we could kind of march on to Cuba, and then one after the other. And yeah, you're right. I think it's overstated the base for that kind of politics. It's certainly there in Cuba, and there are increasingly Venezuelan migrant communities. But yeah, I don't think, and again, for the most part, Rubio is his kind of geopolitical and internationalist kind of ambitions really do kind of sit in tension with the America First isolation. Well, the claims to be isolationist and the claims to be no longer interested in getting involved with foreign wars, which is what Trump ran on and what I think Vance kind of stood for in a lot of ways. And so, in many ways, Trump has become even more involved in foreign policy in this first year than
A
I
lot.
think.
Yeah, he didn't mention foreign policy the first time around.
Yeah,
He mentioned it, I think, I read somewhere over 5,000 times he's mentioned foreign policy. Me and most of this is Venezuela and Greenland. A little bit in the early days when he got in office about how he made peace in Israel,
right,
in the West Bank, but that's of course not true.
right.
Um, but this intervention has reverberated beyond energy markets, from U.S. congressional debate about oversight to concerns from other nations about U.S. military adventurism. How does Venezuela fit into broader U.S. power politics in Latin America and even globally right now?
I think that they tweeted it out that if you saw the State Department, that this is our hemisphere in very
Mhm.
like menacing bold letters. I think there is this kind of weird geopolitical restructuring going on where it was really surprising and shocking, actually. Very early in Trump 2, about a year ago, Rubio gave a interview where he did actually talk about the multipolar world and just acknowledged it as a thing that exists, right?
Mhm.
Which is not something American power would ever admit before, right?
Mhm.
So that, how I read that is like they are starting to say, well, yeah, sure, Russia can have Ukraine and China can do what it wants in its sphere, but we're going to take this hemisphere, right? We're going to start to really show our power in Latin America in ways we haven't recently, right? And so I think that ambition is it's kind of strange. It's like a retreating from America's general global imperial ambitions to be just sort of have their hands in everything everywhere, and to say we're going to take a step back from that and actually ratchet up our imperialism in this hemisphere in again really spectacular and crazy ways. So that's the thing that makes sense to me. But again, it's hard, as I put in the piece, it's kind of hard to kind of parse what the role of capital is in
Mhm.
shaping this kind of agenda, and whether or not it's just this kind of more state-centered geopolitical ideological type of a gambit to assert power, to sort of, as Trump, I think, just for him as an individual, he's really a person that wants to demonstrate power.
Mhm.
Um,
Mhm.
and the Economist wrote that there's no other military that could have done what the U.S. military did in Caracas. I think there was like 150 fighter jets. These special forces are part of a 70,000 strong special forces regime.
So how much
And
does that cost, though?
yeah, well, that's another part of our imperial power is our ability to run constant deficits and pay for this bloated military industrial complex, right?
I mean, if you're spending all this money to extract a foreign leader that only one state in the union with 50 states probably cared to remove,
Right.
even the neighboring countries didn't ask for your help. And you did it all on the guys that, well, there was drug dealing going on, which is kind of scary because there's drug dealing going on outside of the White House. I mean, if I don't want to shift the focus too far away from what's going on contemporarily in like Minneapolis, but I heard the Tom Homan speech today where he was talking about kind of the scourge of immigrants and drugs flowing into the country, and I'm like, well, maybe I would have listened to this in the 90s when I was coming of age. I'm 48. Because there were drugs coming from South America,
Mhm.
mainly very cheap cocaine.
Yeah.
And it caused major problems in my neighborhood of Richmond, California, where I'm from. That being said, the drugs that are causing the problems in my community in the San Francisco Bay Area are drugs that American companies make.
Mm-hmm.
You know, Oxycontin and fentanyl and Adderall. And you can just go get really, really, really high quality, super concentrated marijuana at just a place. Like, these things are legal.
Right.
And there's no nefarious brown people smuggling them up their butt for U.S. consumption.
I mean, there's, I think you can see some trace of fentanyl and, obviously China and then through Mexico, it's coming that way, but it's not coming through Venezuela. There's
No.
no world in which Venezuela is responsible for the fentanyl crisis, which is a major crisis. And I think it's also clear that Venezuela can be linked to some of the cocaine that's still flowing in the country, but we are not. Cocaine is a bad drug. It's horribly addictive, but we are not dealing with a cocaine crisis right now.
No,
It is not.
methamphetamines and fentanyl,
Yeah, it's fentanyl. Fentanyl is the thing and has nothing to do with Venezuela. So the pretext that this is about drugs is just completely fabricated and crazy, right?
And then to say it's about oil, and then it's like, well, and there's no oil capital behind it.
Yes.
The whole thing just seems like a scary fiasco, and that's saying a lot. Like, I lived through the Reagan years and Bush 1 and 2, and Obama.
I'm 47, by the way, so we're basically the same. We've lived through the same crap.
So right? You can honestly say, like, I remember X, Y, and Z.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's so strange to see. Like, I don't understand where it works out geopolitically for the U.S. to do what they just did with Maduro. I don't know if I read this on, I think it was like MSNBC or something, where they're trying to make a deal with Maduro that they'll let him go if he admits that they tampered with the 2020 election.
Oh my God. Oh my God.
I read that today before we started.
Yeah, I'm sure everyone believed that. Wow.
It feels like these moves, and I don't know if you feel the same way, are ways to get attention away from other massive blunders.
Right.
Because it feels like Minnesota was a way to get your eyes off Venezuela.
Well, I mean, in between was the entire economy almost collapsed over the Greenland negotiations in Davos, right? And there was, it's just crazy amounts of whiplash, and it's actually stunning how little people are talking about Venezuela right now.
Because do you think? I mean, you wrote this piece that I think people should still be, trying to think about, but it's almost like, well, we're past Maduro. We don't care anymore. Now we have to worry about Greenland. And then Trump goes to Davos and goes, nothing to see here.
Exactly.
I was just pulling your leg.
Yeah.
And now all eyes are on Minneapolis.
Right.
Even globally to a certain extent.
Yeah.
That being said, with the horrors that we've seen in Minneapolis, and I don't know if you read the Atlantic article that came out recently, where they had a reporter on the ground that was telling his story about what he was seeing. And one of the kind of most frightening stories I heard was that at a memorial for the good woman who was murdered, one of the ICE agents grabbed a flower from her memorial and gave it to, like, a male agent gave it to a female agent, like in front of all the people. And one of the people was like, you just stole a flower from a dead woman. Like, that's a certain level of callousness that's like, you can't be that tone deaf.
Yeah.
That being said, these protests that we're seeing are not to the level of what we saw in 2020. And it looks like Trump is trying to backpedal out of Minneapolis. And And now the focus is on tampering with the 2020 election in Georgia. I'm sure you saw that.
I haven't even seen that yet. I'm behind on the
Oh,
latest
yeah.
thing.
You're behind. You're like, I just spent a month and a half researching how oil reserves are functioning, and now this fool's doing this.
Yeah, incredible.
How much can he do in the second term before the Democratic Party has to go, look, man, we have to impeach you again, and this one might go through this time. You want to be the first at something, maybe. Because what's next? What can he do next? He's done a lot in less than 2 years.
Oh, I mean, it's been literally a year and 10 days. It feels like it's been much longer than that. But there's going to be no impeachment until midterms, and God help us, knock on wood, the midterms take place. And I think you probably saw that there was negotiations with Nome, like, we'll let you do an investigation of Alex Preddy if you hand over the voting rolls of.
Yeah.
I mean, and Trump has done a lot to put into place some of his very loyalist people in the kind of election monitoring infrastructure that were not in place in 2020. So there were a lot of sort of just, even if they were Republicans, even like Mike Pence, like people that are just like, I'm going to do my job and my duty to the bureaucracy over some guy. And that's not the case this time. So
no.
Anyway, I think there's a lot of very scary prospects about the election, but you would think the Democrats will win handedly, and at least win back one house of Congress. But the Democrats are so uninspiring and incompetent. We can't expect them to win the kind of majorities that would actually lead to an impeachment being successful. So, unless the Republicans really turn against him, which they've shown no capacity to do, right?
I don't think Marjorie Taylor Greene is an outlier.
Yeah, well, she is one, yeah, and
I don't think
she's out. She's literally not in Congress anymore.
She literally left. I don't think she's the only one to fall. I think the amount of leaks that you get from this administration kind of show you that there's some people that maybe lied to keep a job. Like, oh, I am loyal to Trump and not the Constitution. Right? We don't know, and this is destroying the Republican Party. So there's definitely some people within that can't stand him. God, what is that guy's name? Not Tillis. What is his name? One of those Republican senators has just been on the I hate Trump tear, and the entire cabinet. I think there's some fissures within. I don't know how big that's going to be. I'm not going to sit here and pray to my somebody's God that Republicans jump on board the impeachment bandwagon. But back to Venezuela, which is pretty serious. If your analysis is right about the oil economics, I don't support the simplistic story of Venezuelan crude flooding global markets. What do you think the real long-term outcome will be economically, politically, and geopolitically?
It was such a brazen move, I would say a reckless move, that it's really hard to kind of like predict what's going to happen. I don't know. I actually should have looked this up before I talked to you. Presumably they are due to have another election in 3 years or 4 years, because they were still having elections at the constitutional amount of time they're supposed to. So, you would hope, if we had a a sort of just a technocratic, sort of competent regime in place, you would think the U.S. would be doing everything it could to create the conditions for fair and free elections in Venezuela. But that is not the regime we have, and I think, demonstrated they're not very interested in fair and free elections, both here or there, right? But if they were, I would expect Machado to win, to run and win, and then that's not good for. By the way, that's not good for people like us, for the left, because she is, as far as I can tell, a very sort of hardcore right wing type of free market type person, which that might, in the long term, if she were to create some stability in the regime and create and sort of coalesce her somewhat, she does have this kind of popular base behind her, then capital might be a little more interested, because she would actually create a much more favorable legal regime for capital. Like, of course, like Maduro is part of the regime that nationalized the oil in 2007 and kicked out a lot of Western oil companies, right? So she would likely be rolling out the red carpet for oil companies to come in and have a lot of like tax breaks and favorable conditions for them. There was some talk that the Trump administration would do that even before she would, but of course that would likely have to come with U.S. taxpayer support. And we fund with our taxes a lot of crazy stuff, but I think a lot of people would not love the idea that we're funding the Venezuelan oil industry to get back off the ground.
No, I don't think any Americans wanted that. Again, outside of a handful of people in one state.
Yeah.
I don't know any Americans that, what we need to do.
Trump did float the idea of reimbursing the companies for their investments at one point. He actually said that out loud. But again, that would have to be Congress. That would have to be like, yeah, we're going to spend billions of dollars to resurrect the oil industry. But again, if Machado comes in, she creates this kind of neoliberal right-wing regime, like in Argentina or something like that, where they're like, we will do everything we can to entice these companies to come back in. Maybe then they could set the conditions for a little bit of an oil boom there.
Jesus, but what does that do to the people? Also, there was a big brain drain with all the people leaving.
Yeah.
If you're trying to fight immigration and protect your American borders, even though you have thousands of people, thousands of miles away from your American borders, what does this mean about the flow of migration from Venezuela if that country remains even more unstable with another regime?
Yeah, and another really great oil scholar, Adam Hanai, wrote a piece for Verso's blog where he pointed out that Venezuela's refinery sector has been decimated over the last couple decades, so much so that I think he said maybe 15 years ago, they were making up a quarter of Latin America's refining capacity, and now they're down to 6%.
Damn.
Which means that even though they produce a lot of oil, they can't refine it, which means they are often exporting crude oil and then importing refined petroleum products, which crude oil you can't really use. It's not really something that's useful. You have to refine it into all the products that we use from oil. Mm-hmm. So the fact that they're this major oil power and they have to import refined products is a very sad state of affairs for them. And I bet you that's not entirely, but that's related to the brain drain you're talking about, because a lot of that brain drain can be like actually petroleum engineers and refinery technicians and people that actually know how to do that type of production. So
yeah, it's not like you can grab someone off the street and they can figure that shit out. So
yeah.
It's a scary situation. What are you working on next, Matt?
What am I working? I've been working on this essay on ecology and imperialism for a couple of years now, and it's and now this happened, right? And I feel like I have to rewrite parts of it. But it's trying to take a longer view of how we think about like environmental degradation in relation to imperialism and U.S. imperialism in particular. So,
well, please let me know when the next thing is ready, and I hope we can have you back on the show.
Yeah, thanks. I'm a fan of the show, so thanks for having me.
Oh, well, next time you got to play your guitar.
Maybe.
Well, thank you, Matt, and have a good one.
Yeah, take care.
That is Matt Huber. Wherever you're watching or listening to the show, there's a link in the description to Matt's piece in Jacobin. I believe there should be a link in the description to Matt's Substack as well, where he writes a little bit more in depth, where he doesn't have to deal with the editors. Jacobin. That being said, I'm going to leave for a little bit and be back at 6:30 Pacific, where I'll be talking with union organizer, activist, author Eric Blanc about why we shouldn't be too overzealous about some of our leftist political victories and what we can currently do to fight ICE. I just found out my high school, Albany High School, they won't be having school. They're doing a walkout for the general strike tomorrow. So shout out to Albany High. All right. And on that note, guys, I am, wait a minute, where to go? Out. See you in a little bit.